Yo, what is up, everybody? We are back with another stream, our third stream of the week, or our third stream in the last 7 days. Been rapid fire. This time I am joined by Professor Carlos Garrido. His doctorate, of course, was earned at the same university as Dr. Mike Israetel in exercise
No.
science.
Is that
he,
real?
he, what?
Did Mike Israel go to SIU?
No, I
I would
just
have
made
shot
that up.
myself. Oh my God, that would have
I
been
just made
brutal.
that up because I saw
I would have
doctor.
had to wear the black pill glasses the rest of the stream. Like, fuck, man, I can't do this. I'm worth nothing.
No, I don't know where Dr. Mike went. But all of our PhDs are real here at the ACP in the Midwestern Marx Institute. I know that Carlos's PhD dissertation took a lot more work than Mike Israel's must have. It's dissertations like yours that piss me off about that whole situation, where it's like, bro, you Chat GPT'd your PhD thesis, got it passed because your advisors were turds who didn't care, and then called yourself a doctor for the
Oh my
next few
God.
decades.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's neither here nor there.
Holy shit, what the hell happened? Eddie just disappeared. He must have clicked out of something. But, well, guys, today we have a really good program set up for you. There, he's back.
CIA got me.
The CIA got him. I knew it. Um, I do have there's a good YouTube channel, very big philosophy channel, Gregory Sadler. He went to the same program as me. He got his PhD from SIU as well. One of the best philosophy channels out there. But anyways, Eddie, you were the one that prepared the itinerary for tonight. What are some of the topics we're going to be hitting?
Yes, I want to talk about why we support Palestine, but not Ukraine, because I did a video on that the other day and it went mega viral. Like one of the most viral videos I've had this entire year, over 1 million views. Because it's very interesting for people, especially now. Originally I got deleted off TikTok, got banned, got attacked by, hordes of liberals for questioning the war in Ukraine. But now, after a few years, as always, people are seeing in hindsight that the Marxist Leninists were right all along, and public opinion is kind of changing. So I want to give people the tools to understand why those two conflicts are different, and it kind of gives us a good example of why you have to look at conflicts concretely and in specificity. There's no, Russia's a big country attacking Ukraine, which is a small country. Israel's a big country. Palestine's a small country. Therefore, we support Ukraine and Palestine. It's more complicated than that. You have to look at the different opposing forces that are driving each conflict. So we're going to talk about that today and break that down. I see some people. I talked to Carlos about this before the stream. I see them saying, "Bro, how are you going to put Yasser Arafat on there?" Chad, do we support Yasser Arafat? Because of course Yasser Arafat and the PLO kind of sold out at the end. I just did that because Yasser Arafat's a more recognizable figure. Obviously, in our tradition, the Marxist-Leninist tradition, it would have been Ghassan Kanafani, George Habash, somebody from the PFLP. But the PFLP was a part of the PLO, right? They worked together with Yasser Arafat and the larger organization for the purpose, or Habash and Kanafani might have been before Arafat. I might be getting the timelines messed up. But either way, they worked with the PLO in order to fight for the liberation of Palestine, which is how the PLO worked. It was, our main goal is the liberation of Palestine. So we can have different branches, including a Marxist-Leninist branch, that are fighting for that common goal together, albeit with their separate specific ideologies and strategies. So Arafat is not like a Kanafani where we, hold him up as like a hero who did everything right or pretty much everything right. But, still a figure who fought for his country and was, viewed as the leader of the Palestinian resistance for many years. So that's why I used him.
And the comments worked, man. That's what we wanted. We wanted people to engage with this polemically framed thumbnail.
Yes, like, comment, and share the stream, by the way. Leave all the comments questioning Arafat. Before I get to super chats and we play the intro, what are your thoughts on Arafat, Carlos?
Contradictory figure, he had a good relationship with Fidel Castro, and I'd like to think that Fidel is a good, is the type of individual that knows how to judge someone's character in a very astute manner, and he had a lot of respect for Arafat. Whether he sold out or not, you know, I don't know, but yeah, contradictory figure. There's not
Maybe
much I
not
can
sold
say.
out, but capitulated.
Capitulated, yeah, yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of like Edward Said, where you're like,
Mhm.
yeah, he wrote some good things about Palestine, you know, but if we were to debate ideology and the specifics of ideology, we'd probably have a ton of disagreements.
Yeah.
But at least, you know, he was in the right place in terms of Palestine. Lennon Dubois, what a great name. ACP Tennessee represent. What's up, comrade? Welcome. Thank you for the 2. Shout out to ACP Tennessee. And holy cow, Red Maze, our beloved moderator. Thank you, comrade. Sup, comrades? Eddie Carlos, have a good stream. We will, comrade. What a good way to start out the stream. That's incredibly generous. For those of you who don't know, Red Maze has been a generous donor. All of our support comes from you, the audience, not benevolent billionaires. And he actually bought a drone for the ACP that we have been using to film multiple really, really, really cool videos. The stuff we've been able to do with that drone is really sick, really adds a touch of professionalism to our videos. You guys know how it is. If you're watching a video and you see one of those panning drone shots, you know, it just looks sick. Like you stop and watch in awe for a little bit. It really adds to the video. So that's thanks to Red Maze. Did a lot for our party there and has done a lot for Midwestern Marks. So appreciate you, comrade.
It was able to capture that second event that we did in, I believe it was early May, where we were able to show off because of the drone how many people were there, the sheer tour de force that was that event. And the biggest compliment of the whole thing was our ops saying, man, they did AI on this. These are AI people. They're not real people. When your ops are saying those people are AI, that's how you know you got a fuck ton of people over there in Chicago as a communist organization. That's you know, a compliment.
Yes, the drone debunked our haters' biggest argument. DDG in the chat too. What's up, guys?
What's up, comrades?
What up? Thanks for being here. All right, we're going to get right into breaking down the difference between Ukraine and Palestine right after the intro video. So we'll see you real soon. Sit tight, stay tuned.
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only plan. He digs through pockets, takes what he can, for he's High Sheriff Hazard. He caught me one evening, and here's what he said: you look like a Russian, you look like a red, and if you're fond of your skin and your head, beware the High Sheriff of Hazard. The answer is simple, the answer is clear. We all get together, ain't got nothing to fear. We throw the old bastard right out on his ear. Farewell to High Sheriff Hazard.
Let's go. I'm glad people like the song. It's one of my favorites. I actually picked that one out. Kyle showed it to me. Iron Kyle. Um, let's see. Another super chat. Thank you, comrade. What is ARS currency? That would be Argentinian pesos. Sweet. Thank you for the 500 pesos, comrade. Looks like an infrared comrade in Argentina. Thanks for the 20 million bailout for Argentina, suckers. Not that it helps that much. I haven't seen a single improvement for me and my family. I feel sorry for your taxes going to my failed government, but oh well, it's not like it was good before. Yeah, I mean, it's just money that the big banks printed off anyways, so it's no skin off our backs, but it is ironic, isn't it? The first libertarian government in Argentina, the great libertarian leader Milei, needs a bailout from the U.S. government because its entire country's in poverty now and everything's breaking. Just classic. It's every single time there's been a libertarian or anarcho-capitalist government in power, they've needed just absurd amounts of government repression and state bailouts in order to maintain the regime. So
Have you seen that meme that's like Milei talking about the need for privatization of certain key industries, and then he goes ahead and privatizes them, and then the fucking Chinese are the ones who buy it. So we need to privatize these industries to get them away from communist hands, and then the Communist Party of China just steps in and buys it like a bunch of chads.
that's so funny. What a perfect, just epitome for liberalism that Malay is. I just love this picture.
Oh
this,
the
the
those are the
funniest
aesthetically superior individuals. That's what he could.
the funniest meme I've ever seen is this picture, and it's got like the Snapchat caption, and it says, "Will Argentina become the world's first fourth world country?" That's so good.
On a more positive theoretical note, the experience in Argentina might be the new route to socialism that wasn't predicted by Lenin or Marx or anyone, because who knew that you could privatize enough of your country to the Chinese that eventually you become a socialist state?
Checkmate, libertarians.
Oh my God.
No, so actually, they're not becoming a fourth world country. They're becoming a communist country.
Through going through the path of from fourth world, they turn into their opposite dialectically, and they become a first world Chinese country.
It's that video that Haas did, like Stalin and Mao are the biggest libertarians or something.
There you go.
It's proof. Okay, so let's get into Ukraine and Palestine. As I said earlier, I made a video that went real viral discussing just in general for people who are like noobs to politics, why we support Palestine and not Ukraine. And we've been doing more segments like this lately, trying to remember that not all of our audience is glued to politics and is reading theory and all this stuff like us, and trying to explain the basics a little bit more. But I mean, we've explained how the war in Ukraine got started a million times, but really it's a U.S. puppet government, a NATO puppet government that was created by the CIA and the NED and U.S. NGOs, funneling money and support into right-wing ethno-nationalist groups. And this did not start just in 2014 or whatever. This started at the end of World War II with what was called Project Aerodynamic. And the whole goal was to break up Ukrainian, because of course Ukraine was a socialist republic during the Soviet Union. And the whole idea was to break up socialism by promoting ethnic conflict. You can't be socialist. You need to hate the Russians because they're Russian and you're Ukrainian. That's basically the idea. Promote ethnic conflict to prevent class unity. And over time that worked. And you had all these, after the fall of the Soviet Union, when the U.S. was allowed to just run rampant in Ukraine, you had the rise of all these far-right neo-Nazi militias who were killing ethnic Russians in the eastern part of Ukraine and what's known as the Donbass region. And Zelensky wasn't, he was critical of these guys when he campaigned and was elected in 2016, but they told him, like, fuck off. We control the government. We run stuff here. And he was just like, okay, and let them keep running rampant in the eastern part of Ukraine. So, you know, what it comes down to with these global conflicts is you can't look at it moralistically so much as you have to look at the historical conditions that created the situation and the global conditions that surround it, the global context that surrounds it. So the US sees the world as like a chessboard, and in many ways, in terms of geopolitics, it kind of is. And what they're trying to use Ukraine as is a pawn to attack Russia, which is why NATO has continually expanded towards Russia's borders for years and years now. And you have to look at the broader context too, in terms of Russia, where Russia has nationalized a lot of their energy industry. They've, since the collapse of the USSR, when their country was pillaged by Western oligarchs, they've now course corrected a little bit under Putin and cracked down on these oligarchs somewhat and kicked out more Western corporations. And this has angered the West. So you have to understand the context is that they want regime change in Russia and China. They see Russia and China as their number one enemies right now and want to do whatever they can to overthrow those governments. So everything you hear about, we care about the Ukrainian people and their sovereignty and their territorial integrity, it is all bullshit. They are sending Ukrainian people to their death, and they know they're doing so in order to harm Russia and to weaken Russia. So this is the global context. And if you look at the global context in Ukraine and Palestine, it's the exact opposite. Israel, like Ukraine, is an arm of Western imperialism in that region. The Atlantic Council, which is a mouthpiece for the military-industrial complex, explicitly said that their goal was to turn Ukraine into a larger version of Israel. So what you have here are two U.S. puppet states waging war against the state that the U.S. doesn't like. And you have the same ethno-nationalist, ethnic supremacist ideology in both countries. The Ukrainians think they're superior to Russians. The Zionist Jews think that they're superior to Arabs. And this is the kind of ideology that the West has fostered in both countries. So how ridiculous is it to say, I support the ethno-nationalists in Ukraine, but I don't support the ethno-nationalists in Israel, right? Why? Just because Ukraine and Palestine are both smaller than Russia and Israel geographically? That's not what it's about, right? These are arms of Western imperialism. And Russia, by proxy, or just in reality, objectively, is fighting Western imperialism in their region. And it's sad that people have to die. It's tragic. It's horrific that the U.S. is continually preventing Ukraine from accepting a peace agreement and bringing an end to the bloodshed, right? But in the end, at the end of the day, Russia is doing what they have to do to actually protect their territorial integrity and to prevent, the second complete devastation of their country and the pillaging of their country by Western shareholders and banks. So these are both struggles against Western imperialism, and the countries struggling against Western imperialism are not Ukraine and Palestine, it's Russia and Palestine. And that's not something I'm saying because I like Russia morally, because I respect Russia's wrestlers, even though I do, of course. It's because objectively, within the global and historical context, they are resisting imperialism, which is reactionary. And resisting imperialism is progressive. Imperialism is reactionary.
Look, this might sound like a very bold proclamation, but the position that actually cares the most about regular Ukrainian lives is the one that's in favor of Russia in this conflict, because it understands that those who are driving Ukrainians into the meat grinder of war, young kids, elders, that are absolutely disseminating Ukraine, are the same imperialists that are pushing and encroaching up against the borders of Russia, are the same imperialists that, as you very astutely put it, are using Ukraine as a pawn. The only pro-Ukrainian position you can have is to stand on the side of Russia, which is standing against the empire that is disseminating countless millions of Ukrainian men, specifically men, but also men and women and families generally that are being destroyed. And this position that a lot of pseudo-leftists, people that pretend to be leftists but are totally not, have, which says, as you very correctly put it, once again, big country, therefore big country, Russia bad, Israel is big country, therefore they're bad, and then Ukraine is small country in this context, as is Palestine, therefore both of them are good. It's like, having to deal with a fire, and you look at the fire extinguisher and you say, well, the fire is red and the fire extinguisher is red, and therefore they're both fire and they're both bad and I can't use it. No, you idiot. It's not about pulling these abstract characteristics and understanding the world through it, but understanding, instead of in this fetishistic mode, understanding the relations that situate things in very specific systems. And what people do not understand, and this is why they have to not only read Lenin, but understand how capitalism has developed. Imperialism is a system. It's not a series of foreign policies that one country or another makes. It's a system that's rooted in the dominance of finance capital. And in Lenin's time, it was international. That meant that it was a system that was rooted fundamentally in these different great imperialist powers, and it led to constant war with each other. But after the Second World War and the establishment of the Bretton Woods system and dollar hegemony, there's the emergence of all these global institutions of finance capital, all of which are controlled by the United States. Can Russia say anything to the IMF? Does Russia or China have any pull in the World Bank? No, they don't. The only country that can actively shape the policy of those global institutions of finance capital is the United States of America. So what does imperialism look like today in this new globalized form? It looks like US hegemony. It looks like US unipolarity. It is dollar hegemony. And so de facto, if you have this systems analysis, this dialectical analysis of the world, you realize that any country struggling against the access of the world that is controlled by the US is objectively fighting against imperialism. That includes Russia, which is not a communist country. That includes China. That includes the axis of resistance in Palestine. That is why those countries are on the same side. It is not because big country and small country and justice and this. No. It's about where you stand on the question of imperialism, which today is fundamentally defined by that shift that happened with the emergence of the Bretton Woods system, with the move away with Nixon of the gold standard and the dominance of finance capital in this new globalized form that's controlled by the United States.
And you guys know the coups that have happened in Africa recently, right? The Sahel region, these socialist, anti-imperialist coups, carrying on the legacy of Thomas Sankara, the legendary Marxist-Leninist revolutionary leader. Who do you think gave them the guns? Who do you think gave those African revolutionaries the guns? It wasn't China. China gave them development, or, China's giving them development and financing. It was Russia who gave those anti-imperialist countries the guns. So again, when you look at the global chessboard, everywhere that you have a government fighting against Western imperialism, it's Russia and China and Iran backing them. And that's not to say Russia and Iran are socialist communist countries, but objectively, if you look at the situation concretely, they are resisting U.S. imperialism in their region. Who are the countries who are standing with socialist Venezuela now, a country that is, objectively, or outwardly stated as socialist? It's Russia, it's China, it's Iran, it's these, the countries who make up the emerging multipolar world, as it's been called before. So, even if you have this worldview that fetishizes the global South and looks at any country that's large and powerful as evil, even if it's resisting imperialism, well, look at the countries supporting those nations in the global South. It's Russia, it's China, and it always has been. It's always been, the Soviet Union and the Russians giving guns and support and advice and funding to revolutionary anti-imperialist movements around the world. And sure, the U.S. killed the Soviet Union, but they never killed that spirit. They never killed that consciousness among the Russian people to support independence and sovereignty and to reject U.S. imperialism and U.S. puppet governments. Are Ukrainians the most brainwashed people on earth? They hate Russia so much that they are willing to enslave themselves to NATO. It's tragic. Thank you, Corvid. I think it's, I don't know. I think a lot of Ukrainians are actually sick and tired of the war. All of the media outlets and all of the opposition political parties in Ukraine have been shut down forcibly by the Zelensky regime. So it's very hard to know what's actually going on in Ukraine right now in terms of support for the war, because of the media blackout and information blockade that's going on there. But it seems like right now Zelensky's top aide was just investigated for corruption, which makes you think that elements of the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian population are tired of the war and tired of the Zelensky regime refusing any kind of peace agreement. What's even more crazy, I think, is the European countries, the EU countries, because their leaderships are fully on board. They hate Russians with this vicious, deeply ingrained completely fascist Russophobia that is ingrained in these European countries like France and Germany and the UK to a lesser degree, I think. But this like European arrogance and fear of Russia and a view of them as like the hordes, and they're shooting themselves in the foot by refusing to trade Russian energy, and just going along with this war against Russia because Russians bad, I guess, as if Russia didn't save all your asses from Hitler. It's so absurd.
And these are the enlightened, democratic European countries whose leaders have single digit favorability numbers across their population, while the barbarian and backwards and undemocratic Russian Federation is has one of the most popular governments on the whole planet. Like, it's very, very high levels of popularity that the Putin government has, irrespective of what you think about them.
Can I say, yeah, and even as communists, right? We support the KPRF and the communists in Russia. We would like them to move in a more communist direction, but even we have to admit it's not the time right now. It's always the time to organize and fight and educate, right? But not the time to like launch a revolutionary movement or anything right now, because we have to admit that Putin is popular, right?
Mhm.
He's popular. He's implementing, socialist style, anti-imperialist
Yeah.
economic policies, which, eventually I think that will stop. And then, that'll be the time for the communists to come up and take things further.
Mhm.
But, even as communists who Putin isn't our number one choice, we have to admit he's very popular. It's not just that he's controlling all the polls and controlling all the elections. He's done a lot to rebuild the Russian economy, reinstate Russian sovereignty rather than allowing them to become a colony of the US. And he's promoted religious and ethnic harmony in a way that,
Yeah.
the Russian people are really proud of. And they don't have as much of this like edgy race war, Nick Fuentes type attitude, because they see that as fascist and disgusting and what they fought against in World War II.
And look, here's the real red pill. The reason why he's so popular is because of the different aspects of his governance that are in full continuation with the Soviet Union and the Soviet policy. That's part of the reason why today in Russia, 67% of the Russian people have that's the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life, have a very favorable view of Vladimir Lenin. I can't imagine it's unconnected to the fact that whether it's foreign policy, whether it's industrialization efforts, whether it's the promotion of culture and education and traditional values to a certain extent, all of those are a continuation of the Soviet Union. It was the Gorbachev regime and the Yeltsin regime that brought liberalism into Russia. It was
And
that
what's their
regime.
popularity?
No, it's completely through the floor.
Less than 10%.
It's in the single digits, as popular as are the governments in Europe. So, it's which might tell us, maybe this is a crisis of liberalism in general as the mode of ideology that capitalism has sustained for the last at least 400 or 500 years. I want to address here one question, which
Yeah.
I think we kind of already addressed. How do you refute the argument of Eastern imperialism? I actually dedicated quite a bit of writing to this topic specifically, not just Russian, but the question of so-called Chinese imperialism. And I demonstrate, as Eddie and I were just speaking about, it's structurally impossible at a stage of imperialism where things have globalized to the extent that they have to speak about Russian or Chinese imperialism. Today, imperialism is de facto the dominance of the US over the global financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. And that's a system that gets erected after Bretton Woods. So to speak about Russian or Chinese imperialism is to try to understand imperialism today in its globalized form as if it still existed, as it did in Lenin's time when it was merely international, when it was about great imperialist powers. Today, that's not how imperialism exists. Today, it's about globalized financial capital controlled and centered in the United States of America.
Yes, I can say a little bit more about that too, but I mean, look at what the imperialists themselves have said about Ukraine. This is the Atlantic Council, which is just a straight up mouthpiece of the military industrial complex of weapons contractors who profit from war. And they've said, you know, Zelensky wants to make Ukraine a big Israel. Here's the roadmap. So is Lebanon and Hezbollah and the Arab militias and Egypt back in the day, were they imperialist for fighting Israel? You know, this Western-backed, murderous, ethno-nationalist U.S. dictatorship in their region, expanding and constantly attacking and killing their people in the name of ethnic supremacy? Of course not. That's resisting imperialism. Well, Ukraine is the same thing. It's an ethno-nationalist government backed by the U.S. with the purpose of exterminating Russians. So is fighting against a government like that imperialism? You know, imperialism is not just action. Imperialism isn't just a war, you know, or violence. It's an economic system that grows from capitalism. Imperialism can exist prior to capitalism too, of course, but in the capitalist mode of production, it's a very specific thing where capitalists not only outsource jobs to countries, but they also overthrow foreign governments in order to make sure that the labor costs stay extremely low and workers in those countries have no protections. They pass free trade deals to increase the amount of jobs that can be outsourced to those countries. And more importantly, even now, they trap those countries in debt. And once you have a country in debt, you have them by the balls because they have to keep making these payments to you. And the debt increases and increases. And then the U.S. says, oh, you don't want the debt to keep increasing? Well, you have to do this structural adjustment program then. This is what the IMF does. And what does that structural adjustment program involve? Cutting the minimum wage, getting rid of labor unions, making cheaper labor costs for the U.S. So the IMF and the World Bank, which were created after World War II, really have control of the entire globe outside of the countries like Iran, Venezuela, and Russia and China, who have not allowed them to take over. The DPRK is the only country in the world that's not actually a member of the IMF and World Bank at all. But those were created after World War II on purpose because the U.S. emerged from that event, that world-changing event, as the dominant empire, as the dominant global superpower. World War I and even World War II were battles between the competing imperialist superpowers over the colonies. In World War II, you just had the X factor of the Soviet Union in there, the communist country fighting on behalf of humanity. But World War I was just all the imperialist powers fighting each other over the colonies, and World War II was in many ways a similar thing. So what emerged from that, though, was one dominant empire, because where did all the fighting happen? It happened in Asia, it happened in Russia, and it happened in Europe. So it devastated the industry of those countries, and the U.S. was now the dominant global superpower. So the IMF and World Bank are created basically to be global central banks and allow the U.S. to control every country. And they have thousands of subsidiary banks who loan and loan and loan and trap these countries in debt to the United States. And then, of course, you have the abolition of the gold standard in the 70s, which creates the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency, or it was before that, right after World War II. But then they got rid of gold. So now every country is desperate for U.S. dollars, and the U.S. can, because so many global transactions happen in U.S. dollars, the U.S. can hurt another country by not allowing them to get any, including, oil with the petrodollar deal and, Saudi Arabia selling all their oil in U.S. dollars. So it's all these financial mechanisms of controlling other countries. That is imperialism. It's not Russia launching a war against Ukraine. It is the Western banks using their control and debt trapping schemes and covert funding of right-wing groups to take over Ukraine and use it as a pawn of the financial Western elite hegemonic ruling class to attack any country that doesn't go along with being a debt colony. That is imperialism in the modern day since the end of World War II. And that's why you can't deny that Russia and Palestine are fighting against it.
And that point that you make of the Nixon era move away from the gold standard, that you have written one of the best articles we've ever published in Red America. If anyone's not subscribed here to Red America, I mean, subscribing just to read Eddie's article is worth it. It's phenomenal work. It's so important because after 1971, the U.S. can just literally print away what it takes other countries' actual work in order to obtain this new global dominant form of currency and to participate in the trade globally thereof. The U.S. can literally just press a few buttons on a computer and achieve monetarily what it takes other countries' actual resources, labor expenditures in order to achieve. So don't talk about Russian or Chinese imperialism, big dog, when this is the state that the US is in, when the US can just print away and do whatever the fuck it wants globally with its global institutions of finance capital. There's no such thing.
Absolutely. And here's my article. Just search Red America or redamerica.acp.us. I recommend subscribing because there are amazing articles, Marxist theoretical works applied specifically to American conditions or global conditions, modern global conditions, every single month. This one is mine, Article 9 or whatever you call it, the 9th edition, or I don't know what the technical issue, the 9th issue. That's the word I was thinking of. Yeah, the 9th issue. I do think it's important. I mean, all of us remember at one point asking our parents, "How does money work?" You know, what do you? It's just paper. How does that work? And I remember asking that repeatedly, and I never got a super satisfactory answer. My grandpa gave me a better answer because he knew how the gold standard worked a little bit, so he explained it a little bit. But in that article, I attempt to answer that question: how does money work, and how did it develop to the point today where it's just paper, and what changes does this have? And it's called a preliminary investigation because I have a whole series of essays following that'll answer different questions that relate to the fiat currency and how that changes everything. However, I would just, if you want to kind of have your mind blown, just Google fractional reserve banking. Google how fractional reserve banking works, and it'll just give you an idea of how money works in the modern world, and it'll blow your mind. When you put money into one of these banks, they create a duplicate of it in a computer. So then they can store your money and loan out the duplicate money, which means they're just inventing money. It's called the infinite money glitch. It's the craziest shit, but that's how our economy works now. It's largely centrally planned that way too, which is ironic. Thank you for the super chat. Another Argentinian peso, 500. Thank you, comrade. At this point, I see no other way out for my country that is not a military coup like the Sahel states, led by the real Argentinian patriots, to jail all politicians and billionaires and distribute the wealth. I agree. Still in the global south, I think there's a lot of countries where the electoral path is not as realistic as the revolutionary path, especially as things continue to deteriorate. It'd be nice to see a red wave across Latin America. I know we've seen a pink wave of electoral victories by socialists, but it would be nice to see some similar actions to what we're seeing in Africa, because also, I mean, with what's happening in Bolivia lately, and even with some of the struggles that the Venezuelan revolution has had, we've also seen the problems with doing an electoral path to socialism. Even if you have mass support on the ground and a more revolutionary consciousness. I don't know who Ali Sinadine or Aldo Rico are, so I can't comment on that. But yeah, I don't disagree with your analysis based on my limited knowledge of your country.
Yeah, I was just talking with my wife yesterday about this, and it seems like Africa is one of the only places in the world that the whole guerrilla war strategy to carrying out a revolution still exists and is vibrant. We just had, I don't know if you're planning on having this as a theme in our itinerary, but the coup in Benin. I haven't checked too much in the last few hours if that was spoiled or not, but man, if that can go through, it'd be huge because it gives the AES a port. It gives them access to the sea, and it'd be a huge blow to France, which of course picked up the phone, little Macron, and ended up calling the puppet president of Nigeria in order to strike their fellow African brothers in Benin for daring to stand up and affirm their sovereignty, right at a time when his country is getting wrecked by terrorist violence from Boko Haram and other now Al-Qaeda aligned and descendant groups. It's It's completely absurd. But Eddie, I have one question for you before we get into this topic. It's a quiz question, so I don't know if you're down to do it. I have a quiz question for you. In my hand, I am holding the flag of the most free and democratic country on the planet. Do you know what the answer to that is? What is the most free and democratic country on the planet?
Well, I've been told my whole life it's the United States, but based on what I know about other countries and their people and their ethic and their consciousness and their history, I'm gonna have to go with North Korea, the DPRK.
It is North Korea. You are absolutely right. You have won one Dugan based.
Based.
There we go.
Let's go.
I bought it for like 50 cents in Mexico. There was all these flags, and I was like, oh, give me the DPRK, give me Palestine, give me Cuba, give me all the based countries.
That's awesome. So the first time we meet Dugan, we have to ask him, like, is the DPRK the most free country on earth? And can you give us a based?
He's such a troller. He'd probably say yes. Yeah.
He would say whatever's the funniest. By the way, it looks like the coup was foiled because of a Nigerian airstrike, an airstrike from the puppet government there. So traitorous scumbags. And unfortunately, the Sahel states aren't in a position to offer support because,
Right.
like Carlos said, they're fighting Boko Haram and shit. All these, we know that France and the US and Israel are behind a lot of these terrorist forces too, like no doubt.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Nigerian people say enough one of these days and go the same route of Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. Every single Nigerian I've met is in favor of Traore, of the AES, completely against their country. I thought it was just a US thing, but I had an Uber over there in Mexico City, which I was just at, a Nigerian Uber. I didn't even have to explain anything to him. He already knew it. He knew the path for African freedom and sovereignty lie in what the AES is doing, in following the lead of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. So I don't know how long the Nigerian government, the half-dead, undead, zombie-like existence president that they have, I don't know how long that dude's gonna, keep that country in check. His people are turning on him quick.
That's why I think we're seeing this push for U.S. military presence to be increased in Nigeria. Why we're hearing all this propaganda about, they're killing Christians, which, of course, Christians are being killed, but it's, a chaotic situation created by U.S. imperialism, and Muslims are also being killed, and everyone's being killed by the extremists. And I think the U.S. is now trying to create the manufacture consent, I guess, for lack of a better word, for eventually going in there and increasing the control that they already have of the country. It's already a puppet state, but why are they threatening invasion then? And spreading all this propaganda. Even the president himself is saying all this propaganda about Nigeria and why the U.S. needs to go in. I think they're worried that they would go the route of the Sahel states, which would be a huge blow to the United States. I think they're worried about Somalia too for that measure. I don't know the exact internal politics there, man.
I have a very distasteful second question, but is that term manufacturing consent, is that now part of the Epsteinian lexicon, or is that still good to use? It was a great concept.
He meant something way different when he said manufacturing consent. We never saw it coming. Manufacturing consent with a high school.
You know what George Galloway just called it? He's like, you look at this island, you get nicer hotels in Cuba, but you don't get extracurricular activities. I'm like, holy shit, that's one way to classify it. Extracurricular activities. God damn.
That's funny. Rodrigo, thank you for the 5, comrade. Great show. Appreciate you. Capitalist innovation was thanks to communism. Communism created everything we have right now, from the smartphone to the internet to AI. I wouldn't be sending super chats if it weren't for communism. It's really true. If you look into the That and like all innovations come from the working class. They all come from the production line. This has been studied even by bourgeois intellectuals so many times. When you look at real innovations in production, they always come from people who are the closest to the work, of course. But who benefits then? Oh, boss, I found this new way to produce this faster. Okay, well, let's implement it. And then more money to the boss. And the worker who invented that, his wage doesn't go up at all. You know, all the innovations of the working class are appropriated by the ruling class under this system. I got to run to the bathroom quick. I'll be right back. Sorry.
Well, I use this as an opportunity. I was supposed to do it earlier and I totally forgot because I'm very shitty at marketing bullshit. But I am starting a new seminar on Marxism and the history of ethics and moral philosophy this Thursday. You have 2 days to sign up. There's limited spots available. There's only a few spots. It's an 8-week seminar. It's basically like $10 a class, which is nothing in comparison to what you'd be paying for a bourgeois education. You're going to be getting an advanced education from someone who teaches at a university setting with a doctorate's degree, except you're going to be getting truth bombs from a Marxist-Leninist perspective. We're going to look at the history of moral frameworks all the way from the Sophists to Plato, Aristotle, bourgeois moral philosophy from Kant and J.S. Mill. We're going to look at Hegel's critique of Mill and Kant, which I've written in a scholarly setting for with Comrade Chris Halali, who I think DDG's in the chat. Shout out to Comrade Chris Halali. And then we're going to end with Marxism. We're also going to look at Nietzsche. I know there's a lot of people that like Nietzsche. I've been teaching Nietzsche now for 7 years. There was some dweeb the other day on a video that I did about my 5 most important philosophy books of all time. I didn't add Nietzsche, and they're like, you don't know any philosophy, because you should have added Nietzsche. So many of those people from the 20th century that you mentioned, they're so indebted to Nietzsche. Well, I have read the vast majority of Nietzsche's mainstream public works, and I have taught them in a university setting. And while some of it is good, I don't think you compare Nietzsche with some of his most important readers in the 20th century, people like Heidegger and all that, and others. So, but anyways, I don't know what Eddie has planned as the next topic. I'll just take this as an opportunity to talk a little bit about the trip I just took this weekend to Mexico City with my wife. It's the first time I've taken a vacation in maybe, I don't know, in the last half a dozen years or something, the last 6 years. Is it true? Well, I don't know. Viva ACP, thank you. Mexico City is beautiful, man. We got to see on, I think it was Saturday morning at Zócalo, which is the central area where the president gives speeches. It's, yeah, definitely 100% Morena pilled. And Zócalo was so fucking packed. I just did a video earlier today comparing the images from the Gen Z protests in Zócalo, where it was like, you could literally see dead space, comparing them to what I got to see Saturday with the 7th anniversary of Morena, the ruling Socialist Party, being in power. And I mean, it's night and day. It's to talk about a revolution against Morena or disruption. It's to commit. I mean, you might as well say the earth is flat. I mean, it's that level of fucking retarded. Morena is so popular. Claudia Sheinbaum has higher ratings than the opposition in the constituencies of the opposition. They lifted 13.5 million people out of poverty in the last 6 years. I mean, for Christ's sake, they've made more universities in the 6 years that they were in power, first with AMLO, than the whole Spanish empire did in 300 years. You know how many of these indigenous poor people are getting thrown into universities, given dignity and an education? And you go to Mexico and you still see contradictions. You still see poverty. You still see homeless people. But fuck, man, everything exists in a process. I see some of these ultra leftists on my comment section to my videos are talking about Mexico's capitalist and Mexico this and Mexico. It's like, what is socialism to you? Is socialism this utopian idea? Do you have a purity fetish? Why do you like my book and still talk about Mexico through a purity fetish form? No, it's obviously not a fucking in the state where China is. But if you looked at China in the 90s, you'd be saying the same fucking shit, and look how stupid you would have looked like now. Mexico's in a process of development. In 6 years, they've lifted, I think, like 1/3 of the people that were in poverty. Don't you think that it's going to keep going and keep improving and keep bettering the conditions of their people, especially now that they keep nationalizing key resources like lithium? I mean, where is your head? Think dialectically, think through the contradictions, think through the movement. Don't just have this metaphysical, ideal, pure notion of what socialism is. You look at Mexico and it doesn't look like that. Oh, therefore it's not socialist. Come on, man. Be serious. The people in the Morena party, a lot of them, the people that founded them, were people that were in the Communist Party of Mexico back when it was actually able to get electoral seats, when it was a real party. The program that Morena has been implementing was the program that the Communist Party of Mexico had for its day-to-day realist political platform. How are you going to talk about it being not a socialist party, a progressive bourgeois? No, it's not. Do they have a more progressive and woke social positions? Yeah, they do. I'll admit that. They're not the most traditional with their social values. But economically, it's, what else do you expect from a country that's right under the nose of the US?
No, real socialism's only in New York City, not Mexico. Just kidding. But it goes to show, like, even if, like you said, even if members of the opposition who probably have more socially conservative positions, even if they disagree on the culture war, social issues stuff, they still support the Morena party in more and more numbers because their day-to-day lives have been improved materially. And this goes to show time and time again, that is how you consolidate the support of your people after a revolution. You just meet their basic needs. You improve their day-to-day lives. This is the reason the Chinese government has like 90% support. It's not because they have all the correct culture war positions or whatever, although, their culture war positions or their social positions are really based in China. It's because the people's lives year after year get better and better and better. How, in the US, we talk about all the time how our generation is living worse than the generations before us and how wrong that is. In China, it's the opposite. So what is there really to complain about if you're allowed to live your day-to-day life and chase your dreams and your basic needs are met? And every day you have more and more opportunities. The opportunities that you have now wouldn't have even been conceivable to your grandparents' generation. So, despite all the culture war, social issues stuff, if you meet people's basic needs and improve their day-to-day lives, that's how you consolidate the support of the people. And that's what we're seeing in Mexico. So, yeah, the idea that there's a revolution against them, what a joke. Color
By the way, I got to meet an ACP comrade over there. I was at the Museum of Anthropology, and I was too late. It had just closed. And someone taps me from behind, and they're like, "Are you Carlos?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, I'm an ACP cadre in Florida." And I got to talk to them. And they're one of the great members that we have over in Orlando. It's one of the most cutting-edge efforts that, one of the most promising areas in the party, just around the country. The stuff that's going on in Orlando with the comrades from Rio, it's almost a blueprint of the type of shit that, we've been telling people to do all over the country, and it's a little bit slower in taking off in some places than it is in others. So it was great to meet the comrade over there, and it felt like a very small world, either a small world or the ACP's big, because I was in fucking Mexico and I was able to meet a comrade over there. So that was pretty cool.
It's sick. Yeah, a lot of exciting stuff coming soon with the Florida chapter. I'll have to let you guys know about that, or we'll let you guys know about that. Also, the Florida chapter is the most overrepresented in our media team, so shout out to them. I work with them very closely, very often.
Shout out to the Hialeah homies. I almost said it.
Yeah, not them as much. I don't see them as much. They're great too, though.
Yeah, but that's basically family down there, Hialeah. I'll always be a Hialeah at heart. So,
all right. So here's what I wanted to talk about next. This is like the only argument against communism that still exists anymore. Is just this picture. We have books and books of theory and historical research and tons of coherent arguments in favor of communism, and the anti-communists just have this picture of the DPRK with the lights off. But as I said here on X just now, this isn't a picture of communism failing. It's a picture of a small and independent nation conserving its people's energy while under siege from a country 82 times larger. If you put capitalist South Korea under the same economic sanctions, the entire country would collapse as the masses starved and the ruling class hoarded the dwindling resources. Only communism can survive under siege from a much larger country and still thrive. So this gets to a point, like oftentimes when a country has a revolution, they always get put under sanctions, right? And some people say, you communists, you blame all of the economic struggles there on sanctions. You say that it's all the embargo. And, really these countries are able to thrive and meet the needs of their people despite those sanctions, despite that siege. But I think when people hear economic sanctions, they tend to downplay it and think, oh, that's just, that doesn't really matter. But no, it's like an old-fashioned siege. Imagine, like back in the day when they would lay siege to a castle, you surround it with your troops so no food can get in or out, no resources can get in or out. That's what the U.S. is doing to Cuba and the DPRK for the last 70 years. It's like a medieval siege of these countries. It's just called soft war, soft power. But someone was saying earlier, economic warfare is warfare. Yes. The U.S. is at war with Cuba. They are at war with the DPRK. They are putting these countries under siege and starving them. And yet these countries still have superior healthcare systems and food production in a lot of ways and all these advantages over us. So it's not that we just blame sanctions on everything either. Of course, we can make criticisms of socialist economic policy. But imagine if a capitalist country like South Korea was put under these economic sanctions. What would happen? The rich would hoard all of the dwindling resources for themselves, all of the energy and the food and the water and the housing. As the economy tanks because they're not able to trade and buy, import and export goods. And then the masses would starve. They would literally starve because there's no system for rationing goods and making sure that they get distributed to everyone based on need. So because of that, no one would have the money to buy stuff. They would starve and they would eventually revolt. It would throw the country into chaos. If you put South Korea under the same economic sanctions as the North, literally, I give it like 2 weeks to a month before the entire society would collapse and become destabilized. Because what these countries do under sanctions, and this is where the U.S. talks about bread lines and all that, is they ration goods. They say, okay, we're under a siege. We only have so much food. We need to ration it so that everybody gets enough. If you put a capitalist country under those sanctions where there's no mechanism of rationing, everyone starves to death and your society collapses. So not only has communism been able to thrive, but it's been able to thrive under an economic siege that would absolutely destroy a capitalist country. So we're not blaming all of the, economic failures that have ever happened in socialist countries on sanctions, although they are the root of a lot of them. We're just looking at the reality of a country trying to develop itself under siege and how impressive it is that these countries have been able to blow capitalist countries out of the water, even despite that. And that's what the DPRK is doing here, is rationing electricity. So at night, we turn the electricity off. So during the day or whatever, during a certain period, we turn the electricity off, usually at night when people are sleeping. So then the rest of the day, everybody has access to electricity, or at least we have the electricity that we need to run our food production and stuff. So this is the necessity placed upon them by capitalist imperialism that the capitalists then turn around and say, oh, look, socialism failed. Capitalism did this, you dipshit.
Yeah, and they ostracize and they de-link the DPRK from the rest of the world, and then they blame it for being ostracized and de-linked. It's like, motherfucker, you're the one that otherized them, that dehumanized them to such an extent that prevented them from accessing any of the global institutions of commerce and trade. And then you have the audacity to sit there and blame them as if it was done out of their own volition by choice when you were the one that put them in that position. And one of the things that people have no idea of, and I beg people to read the book Patriots, Traitors, and Empires from Stephen Gowans, because he outlines this perfectly. How do the two Koreas form? How do the two states in the one Korea form? Do people know this story? There was a united anti-colonial struggle against Japan that was occurring in Korea as a whole. And it was led by Kim Il-sung. Okay? And right after that struggle culminates in the Second World War, when Japanese colonialism is overthrown, the US, which played no role in helping the Japanese colonialists be overthrown, they just come in and start dictating shit. And there was a proposal that the Korean people had put forth for an election, a unified Korean election. Did the US want that election? Of course not. You know why? Because they knew Kim Il-sung and the people that were actually fighting for Korean freedom were going to win the whole country. So what do? They get the rats, the people who appeased the Japanese colonialists, the people that, I mean, the stuff the Japanese were doing, dog, it made the Western imperialists and the Western slave masters look like humanitarians. Horrendous, the ugliest empire, the most vicious and bloody and vulgar empire. The people that were appeasing them within Korea, the people that were their slaves, the Asian example of a gusano, right? Those were the people that the U.S. imperialists put in power over this fake state that they did on the parallel line. I think it was it the 34th parallel line or 38th parallel?
38th.
The
They
state,
drew it in a National Geographic map, 2 U.S. military higher-ups.
and why did they do that? Why did they put these rats that all they did was represent the Japanese colony? Because if they help the Japanese colonize their people, of course they're going to be our guys and help us keep this colony in South Korea. And why did the U.S. need a colony in South Korea? 3 reasons. 1, to be right there next to the North, to hopefully try to continue doing what it's done over the last 70 years, hybrid warfare against the North. 2, because in the midst of the Cold War, you had both the Soviet Union and China right there. And you could use the South Korean fake state as a base of operations against these 2 communist superpowers, as has been used historically. And 3, because Japan, people don't know this because they don't know their history, Japan had a resurgent, very strong communist movement after the Second World War. And one of the things that destroyed the Japanese economy was not being able to trade with Korea and with these countries in the regions that it had been colonized, that it had been colonizing. And so having a colony in the South was able to help stimulate the Japanese economy and deter the threat of communism within Japan. So when you know this history, when I proclaim, or when we proclaim in a very bombastic fashion that this is the free Korea, that this is the free and sovereign Korea, it sounds absurd to someone who's fucking ignorant about the history. But if you know the history, it's common fucking sense. It's the Korea led by the people who have been fighting to free Korea from Japanese colonialism and then American imperialism for the last century plus.
Absolutely. And for those who don't know, the voting plan that was pushed by the U.S. at the UN was a plan to vote for a South Korean president and a North Korean president. And almost none of the Korean people actually participated in that election because they said, no, we want a unified Korea. So that's how the country became divided in 2, with a sham election pushed through the UN by the United States. And what happened next? Well, the Korean people said, fuck this. We're not just going to let this U.S. puppet dictatorship occupy half our country and split it in half. So they took the entire country except for a tiny little portion because nobody wanted to fight for the U.S.-backed forces. And only then did the U.S. bombing campaign begin and the actual deployment of U.S. ground troops to Korea. They get pushed back to here. The Chinese get more involved, push them back to here, and eventually settle on dividing the country in half. But this shows you what the Korean people wanted. They were never about dividing the country and making the South a capitalist U.S. dictatorship. That was never in the realm of possibility for them. They didn't even participate when the U.S. said, this is what we're doing. They just continued fighting and took the whole country. So, you know, and ever since, the U.S. has held the North under sanction while trying to prop up the South and using it to stimulate Japan and using it as a neo-colony in that region, as Carlos just said. So yeah, absolutely. It was a completely nefarious effort in a offensive invasion and occupation that even created South Korea. So of course the North is freer when the South is literally occupied by a foreign power. This person says, can you talk about sanctions more in depth? Yeah, I mean, sanctions are possible because of the global financial system that we talked about last time. That's one of the reasons that sanctions are possible, because the U.S. has so much control over the global economy via the IMF and World Bank. They can cut a country off from financing at any point and prevent them from having connections with other countries. And then they can tell, country A, if you continue to trade with country B, we're going to cut you off from financing and we're going to do less for you. So the US and IMF and World Bank's puppet countries help them to enforce these sanctions by going along with the plan. Whereas a country like Iran will sometimes trade with Venezuela even despite US sanctions. They'll just say F you. Whereas all the US puppet governments who are indebted to the IMF and World Bank go along with the sanction regime. So that's part of the reason they're so effective. But the sanctions are also targeted. So let's take Venezuela for an example. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves on Earth, but most of that oil is extra heavy crude, meaning it's very grainy and rough. And it takes a lot of heavy equipment in order to process it and turn it into oil that's actually usable as energy. So what the U.S. does with Venezuela is they prevent them from getting the equipment that they need to process their own oil. They sanction this heavy industry that Venezuela would need in order to utilize their own oil resources and make tons of money off of it. So the sanctions are specifically targeted based on what a country needs. If a country like Venezuela desperately needs heavy industry for the processing of their oil reserves, that's what the U.S. will sanction and prevent them from getting. So it's absolutely warfare, and it's always designed to starve the people in order to turn them against their government. And it's paired with a propaganda campaign as well. So not only do they starve the people of Venezuela and restrict them from having medicine, food, and things like that, but they flood the country with propaganda saying this is your government's fault, turn against them and help us install a U.S. puppet dictatorship. So just to look at that and say that's just soft power, that's not, actual warfare, I've always said is ridiculous. It is warfare. It's an old-fashioned siege. And you know who really enforces those sanctions? It is the IMF and World Bank, yes, but Cuba and the Caribbean are surrounded by the U.S. military. Who was it when Iran sent oil to Venezuela defying U.S. sanctions? Who was it that intercepted those oil tankers and stole them and took them back to Houston? It was the U.S. Navy. So these sanctions are ultimately enforced at the barrel of a gun, enforced by the U.S. military, like an old-fashioned siege. So to say this isn't actual warfare, again, I think is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I don't know if you mentioned this already, but they've said it explicitly, the reasons why. It's to make the economists scream, to impoverish the people, because that creates conditions where their color revolution campaigns and astroturfing of protests and all this other stuff can function to overthrow the governments that they don't like. And why don't they like these governments? Because these are governments that have the cojones, they have the political will to stand up for the sovereignty of their country and not just let a bunch of American imperialists control and say what goes and what doesn't.
Absolutely. I'm trying to get an update on Benin.
There's a lot of misinformation coming out that, I don't fuck. Both sides seem to be wanting to, I don't know.
All the Western outlets are saying it was squash, but I'm like, part of me is holding out hope that that's propaganda, but, obviously a good chance that it's true. Let's see what these two said.
That's a little bit old. I just saw that this morning.
Oh, okay.
It's good to watch, though.
Yeah, you want to watch it quick?
Let's do it. I think it does mention, I can't hear it, Eddie. I don't know if you can, but I think it does mention the two terror groups, Al-Qaeda and the other one, the ICE one. I don't know if we can use those words on YouTube.
We should be all right on YouTube.
Okay.
Nowadays. We'll see.
Blumenthal and David Hundean, who's the latter is a Nigerian journalist, very famous, did a brilliant piece on Tinubu in the Gray Zone. Everyone should read it, about Tinubu's ties to cocaine trafficking networks in Chicago in his earlier years. So this is the type of guy that we're dealing with, in bed with the CIA, in bed with all these drug narco trafficking units. But of course, the West backs up the real narco terrorists like Tinubu, who, as you point out, are ignoring, I would say, the assault on their sovereignty by Western-backed terrorists like Boko Haram. Also now, JNIM, another terrorist organization linked with Al-Qaeda, has also entered into Nigeria. They have been causing a lot of chaos in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger the past few years. And what is the goal here? Well, the goal is to try and take as many of the resource-rich regions in these countries, in particular in Nigeria, and the U.S. will cry foul. They'll say that Christians are being genocided, even though Christians and Muslims are being killed in both very high rates. Actually, far more Muslims are being killed than Christians in Nigeria. And then Eric Prince or some other private military contractor will get to send in their mercenaries to Nigeria, and they will take up all of the resources.
I know this is random, but this guy sure sounds like a fascist to me. He seems like a white supremacist.
I don't know. He sounds more like a LaRoucheite, red, brown, Nazbol.
Yeah. This is always, if you flip on the Nick Fuentes stream, it's just like this. He's defending Africa, defending the revolutionary governments, pointing out how the U.S. empire is trying to destabilize these countries. Yep, exactly the same. Just kidding.
Some point, if you're straight and have a haircut, that left is going to call you fascist.
That's true. That's true, especially if you're white.
Yeah.
We're so oppressed, me and Jackson. We are oppressed by our white skin on the left. Just kidding. But I was kidding, by the way. If you listen to Nick Fuentes, for those who don't know, when he talks about Africa or Latin America, he's insane. He turns into George Bush. These are tiny, irrelevant countries run by people who aren't white. We should conquer them and steal their resources. They can't stop us from doing it. So again, the idea that Jackson is a right-winger always blows my mind when I hear his analysis, because it's so sharp and so obviously, from a communist perspective.
Resource-rich land, the mineral-rich land, the gold-rich land in Nigeria, and illegally steal all of the resources. As for the question of why can't he do anything about this threat in his own country, in Nigeria, but he launches all these airstrikes or these planes in Benin the moment there's a coup? There's a simple answer for that. President Macron of France gave a call to Tinubu today under the guise that there was a new offensive led by the Boko Haram terrorists in Nigeria. He made an emergency call, and apparently it wasn't about Boko Haram, because if it was, I'd imagine those fighter jets would have been used to do targeted airstrikes, hopefully on the terrorists, but instead they were used to go into violate the sovereign airspace of Benin and presumably strike the coup leaders.
Now, as you mentioned, Narco Rubio and his administration are again steaming towards Venezuela. The Dwight D. Eisenhower aircraft carrier has withdrawn from port in the last few hours and begun steaming towards the Caribbean. The shills of Narco Rubio are trumpeting.
Imagine drone striking revolutionary leaders in your own country to help the U.S. continue to occupy them, especially in Africa, a country that's been so devastated and robbed, a continent that's been so devastated and robbed by the Western powers. You're going to help those Western powers maintain their control over your brothers, over your neighbors. It's the opposite of what Pan-African heroes like Sankara and Lumumba push for.
That it's on, that Operation Southern Spear against Venezuela is on. Is that your take, and what's likely to happen next?
Well, I'll just say it's incredible. Laura Logan, who is a Trump insider, very close with all the Trump administration bigwigs, is, as you just said, tweeting out that Operation Southern Spear is on. This is the U.S. Illegal war that they've been drumming up for months now, or 7-8 weeks now at least. And tomorrow in Caracas, I believe, because what is today? Today, the 7th or the 8th. So it's on the 9th and the 10th, we're going to see about 5,000 to 6,000 people from all across the world standing in unison with the Venezuelan people travel to Caracas and participate in 2 days of major events to try and voice their opposition.
Yeah, so sadly, it seems like the coup in Benin was squashed, but just shows you where the energy is in Africa right now. And it shows you that other countries, especially African countries, but really countries all over the world, are looking to Traoré and the Sahel revolutionaries for inspiration. And this is, the kind of thing Mao was talking about when he said a single spark can start a prairie fire. Like look at 2 coups now, in an attempted coup in Benin, all inspired by this one upstanding, revolutionary leader carrying on the legacy of Sankara, a national hero. And it's a Pan-Africanist revolutionary movement too, which is so important, because Africa is a continent that's been carved up by Western imperialist powers. Their borders, like those of the Middle East, are borders drawn by imperialism. So it's in their interest to unite as a continent against that, and to see that kind of coming back, and making a resurgence in Africa is really great. And as we were saying at the beginning of the show, I hope that spreads all the way to Latin America. Take some inspiration, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people don't understand how quite literally Europe just carved up Africa. 1884, Berlin Conference. Look it up, study it if you haven't already. The great European powers just said, look, this part's going to be me. We like the resources here. That part, all right, you can take. You've historically sold and commercialized around those resources. And then that's how Africa was partitioned. And so many of the quote unquote nations that exist are artificial creations of European colonialism. The African peoples, as Nkrumah said, the only hope that Africa has is coming together, overcoming this balkanization that was imposed by the white man, by European colonialism, to keep Africa divided and weak. And it's that simple. And that's why the AES, the Organization of Sahel States, is so inspiring. It's the basic infrastructure, it's the basic skeletal body of a future Pan-African socialist organization. And it has to be socialist. Why? Because socialism is the only form of social relations that can actually defend sovereignty. You can't defend sovereignty if your resources, the basic resources your people need, are in private hands. You don't have sovereignty if that's the case. So it's, these struggles for sovereignty in Africa, they're socialist and communist in character, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're in full support of them, even if they're not explicitly saying they're communist and Marxist-Leninists. I mean, they're explicitly invoking Sankara, who was a communist Marxist-Leninist explicitly. So, they're pretty much saying that they are. But economically, they're doing socialism because that's the only way to maintain sovereignty. As Carlos said, if you allow your economy to remain in private hands, Western multinationals are going to keep extracting your resources. The only way to take them back is for the state to seize them, for nationalization, socialist policy. So it's great to see. Sankara is a personal hero of mine, someone I've studied a lot. I know a lot of Western leftists kind of utilize him, maybe when they shouldn't or don't actually understand Marxism-Leninism. But either way, he's the Che of Africa. So I also like that they're invoking him in that history. And I think it's important, for applying Marxism to your own country's conditions to recapture your heroes. And people like Lumumba and Sankara, those aren't just heroes to communists. Those are heroes to the countries in which they were born and raised and fought for independence and freedom. So, yeah. Thank you, Iowa Worker. Sorry, I missed whatever you had up there before.
Jason.
Oh, good point. Good point. He retired, though. Our wise and powerful chairman retired again. So,
Wahurism, Unruhiism, whatever the fuck his name is.
Iowa Worker, thank you, comrade. My exercise buddy. Join us on the Heavy app, by the way, HEVY, if you want to lift weights with us and share your lifts. It's been fun.
They got to start paying you, man. I haven't heard of this app until you, and you've been promoting it all over for free.
I know. I got all these people to join just so I can share my lifts with them and see what they're doing. And the app's not paying me anything. I've promoted them so much. We'll see. I'll reach out about a sponsorship, maybe for my MMA account, not my communism account. But
there we go.
Iowa Worker says, when we took the sanctions off Cuba, they had one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Yeah, they had like the fastest rising GDP in Central America, when the Pope pressured Obama to alleviate some of the sanctions, not even all of them. But Cuba just shot up, which goes to show you exactly how those sanctions work in suppressing these socialist countries and what they can do without them. Thank you, Iowa Worker. Keep up the good work in the gym. Jason, thank you for the 10, comrade. The unique design of the early Soviet Union ICBMs and the one NATO codenamed Sapwood were based on well, I probably misspelled, not a misprint design, and not German V2s. Oh, that's interesting. Little piece of military history and manufacturing history. Thank you, Jason. Another weightlifter in the chat. Cuba has survived the U.S. and there is no rent or mortgage. Housing is a right and free. Absolutely. Again, just like with Iowa Workers Super Chat, shows you what they've been able to do even despite the siege, even despite the sanctions. They're still kicking our ass in so many areas. So, very true. Thank you, Jason, for the 15 there. Okay, I have one more. Oh, let me log into my New York Times account real quick. One more story for today.
Unfortunately, you have to give those Zionists, I don't know, $10 a month or something to read the
Yeah,
slop
it's
they post, just so
two-
that we can catch up on what the bourgeois media is saying.
Yeah, they suck, but it is good to keep up with what the mouthpieces are saying. Oh, do I not have? I thought I did have an account. One
I
sec.
think we canceled it some time ago.
I did, but I thought I reinstated it because I do use the New York Times like every day. We'll try it here. Okay, I'm in. Oh, not yet.
I've seen this question, comrade. I can't speak much about it. I haven't studied too much the history of that, so sorry. Yeah, it's tremendously sad what happened in Bolivia, and it goes to show what happens if you allow non-antagonistic and non-principal contradictions to become antagonistic. You end up losing. It was so sad. I mean, what MAS has been able to do for the last 20 years has been incredible in terms of uplifting people from poverty, educating them, promoting literacy, general education, healthcare, basic dignity and recognition for indigenous communities has been, beautiful. And for all that to be lost, is very, very hard, very difficult. Just like the same thing, people don't remember this, but the same thing happened with Correa. The government of Rafael Correa was doing amazing things in terms of developing the economy, lifting people up from poverty, recognizing the plurinational character of the country. And then it was all lost with Lenin Moreno, which, by the way, worst first name to have if you're going to be a reactionary. Poor parents. I don't know if his parents called him Lenin because they were actual G's or what, but to go from naming your child Lenin to having that fucking scum piece of shit who ended up just betraying everything. It's horrendous.
Truly. That's always been funny to me. But the last thing that I had today to talk about is not that related, although I guess it's partially related because it has to do with Venezuela. But the Democrats are really going after Pete Hegseth over the war crimes. And no, this is just the Democrats not saying anything about the sanctions on Venezuela, putting up a very weak resistance to actual war in Venezuela, but they don't like Pete Hegseth specifically, right? Fox News host. He's a member of the other team. And he committed war crimes in Venezuela, I think pretty obviously, bombing these fishing boats with zero evidence that they were actually carrying narcotics, which was the justification that was given. And then killing survivors afterwards. So pretty cut and dry war crime that the Democrats are now going after Hegseth specifically for. And this is because this is where the Democrats can act as controlled opposition. They can go after Pete Hegseth without going after the system itself. They're not going after the system of imperialism. They're not calling for an alleviation of sanctions on Venezuela. They're going after this one guy, this Fox News host who they see as an enemy for war crimes. And if Hegseth ended up being fired for this, what would happen? The system would continue and he would be replaced with another worthless talking head, just another cog in the machine. So again, the Democrats aren't going after the machinery. They're going after surface level stuff. However, I do think it's interesting that they're digging in on this issue, and I do hope that Pete Hegseth faces justice. As we covered in the last stream, Pete Hegseth is a guy who's dedicated his career to helping the ruling elite, people like the Koch brothers, while claiming to be on the side of the troops, the regular Americans and the military service members. But the guy's never been in a firefight in his life. The most military action he saw was guarding torture victims at Guantanamo Bay. He's a pure disgusting corporate hack and war criminal. But he killed fishermen and their families are pissed. So I do hope he faces justice for that. But what do you make of this, Carlos?
I mean, you can't be in the leadership of the American empire without being a war criminal. And as I'm not going to make a joke out of it, but as Chomsky said in one of his most based clips, not only every president, but every administration in general would be guilty if the Nuremberg trials were redone for war crimes and crimes against humanity. They'd be put down for the crimes that they do. And I saw this interesting comment made by Colonel Douglas McGregor on George Galloway just today about this specific issue. I mean, the people that are the most to blame, the most guilty, are people at the top, like Hegseth and the president himself, who I believe Trump admitted that he oversaw the whole thing and supported it. And it's criminal. Just put yourself in the shoes of these families. These were fishermen. These were people who were going out to fish to make a living for themselves. These were, your Hemingway in The Old Man and the Sea. Imagine the Old Man and the Sea, instead of wrestling with the fucking shark, he just gets bombed by the American empire. That's a fucking tragic story. That's a fucking war crime. And that's what the US is doing. Since it can't flex its weight on anyone, because it's been getting fucked up the last however many years by even, unindustrialized, non-modernized armies like in Vietnam or in Afghanistan. It has to flex its muscle by bombing poor fishermen who are very clearly not drug traffickers. And, it's connected to a point of something that I wrote an article about recently on the fetishization of international law. I mean, it's so disgusting when I see people, and I don't know if you mind me pulling this up real quick, Eddie, but
yeah, go for it. I have something to say about it too.
It's disgusting when I see these people that are leftists and individuals, because I get it at the level of the state. If you're like fucking China, okay, you have to speak in those formalist terms. But if you're an individual journalist, as was the person whose tweet I was reacting to, who very prominent, quote unquote, global Marxist, and you keep invoking international law, I mean, what is wrong with you? How many times do you have to see that from the origins of international law, nothing has came out of it, nor the institutions that uphold it? What good has came for the world from the UN? What good has came for the world from any of these institutions of international law? What did they do for Palestine? Every stone, no stone was left unturned when it came to the last 2-3 years of the genocide against the Palestinians. What good did it do? Did it bring about the ceasefire? Is the ceasefire really a ceasefire when Palestinians continue to be getting bombed and images continue arising of maimed and dead children? So why continue treating international law as this fetish object? Yeah, it is VJ. As this fetish object that you treat disconnected of the real international relations that actually dictate what gets done and what doesn't, who reacts to the US and who doesn't. Is the United Nations going to actually carry out an investigation for these war crimes against these fishermen? No. Are they going to actually put together an army to defend Venezuela's sovereignty? No. Are they going to come up with a measure to unite against US bellicosity? No. I mean, every fucking year they vote on the US's blockade of Cuba. And for 33 years or so, they've been voting literally every country on the planet against it, except for the US and Israel. Does anything get done? No. So what the fuck are we doing continuing to appeal to international law? It's like getting a paper the United States and Israel has wiped their ass with, and then you see this shit paper on the floor and you're like, oh, but that paper says this, but that paper. No, it's pure bourgeois formalism. It's pure bourgeois formalism. It's the judicature, the bourgeoisie and its global capitalist order needs in order to present this dichotomy between their formally enunciated values and laws and the reality. And that gap cannot be reformed. That gap is constitutive of the bourgeois form of life itself, of global capitalist imperialism in the form that it exists today. You cannot actually uphold that bourgeois formal international law and order system within the confines of the capitalist political economy that produces it and that it serves to reproduce. That gap is not between the reality and the system. That gap is integral to the system itself. And through this fetish object that has been made of international law, people continue focusing in on one problem, the judicature, instead of looking at the system as a whole and being a realist about how it is that this function. And it's like within the country, it's like blaming everything on the judicial system. Motherfucker, the judicial system is there to reproduce the system as a whole. It flows from the political economy that's at the foundation, at the base of the system. How can people who call themselves Marxists continue treating this as a fetish object? Look, I understand within a country, if you're fighting for rights for a people or something like that, and you're trying to win reforms, that's fine. But it has never been about having the naivete that some of these people act as if they have, that makes it seem as if, once this legal question gets solved, we're good to go. Once international law is enforced, we're good to go. I mean, one of the comments that was made here, it's so incredibly stupid. You are violating international law. You are on notice. On notice from who? Who is the U.S. empire on notice from? What is the UN going to do? What is it going to do? Please tell me, Mr. Global Marxist Scholar, what the fuck is international law going to do? Nothing. Nothing. It never has done anything.
You know what's really weird is I was literally talking about this exact subject to Julia last night before I had even read your article. And I was also talking about it in connection with Vijay. Vijay. But what made me think of it was reading through old court conclusions or court cases from the International Criminal Tribunal on Yugoslavia, which was a kangaroo court created by the United States during the wars in the Balkans to basically convict the people that they didn't like and to accuse the Serbians of committing genocide. And if you look through the rulings in the ICTY, almost everybody, regardless of what they did, because during the war, there were war crimes committed on all sides. It was war. It was horrible. But the people who got convicted, almost 100% of them were those who went against U.S. interests in the region. And almost 100% of the people who weren't convicted or who were let out on appeals despite committing horrific war crimes, like the ethnic cleansing of 200,000 Serbians in Croatia by the U.S.-backed government, those people were all let off. So not only did international law and the ICTY fail to be an actual mechanism for achieving justice, but it was utilized as a weapon of war, just like the United Nations was utilized to divide Korea in half. Mm-hmm. These are institutions created by the bourgeoisie under a bourgeois framework, and they function in that way. The idea that international law is going to all of a sudden start working and being just and seeing through cutting through the contradictions of capitalism to bring true justice. What the hell are you talking about? What planet are you living on? Look at the International Criminal Tribunal on Yugoslavia and what they ruled. I could go into a bunch of specifics. I won't bore you guys, but maybe in another episode, we'll break down a lot of the court cases and how U.S.-backed puppets were let off every time. Well, anyone who went against their interests was convicted, no matter what side they were on. But these institutions are bourgeois institutions that have been used as weapons of imperialism. And even when I was really a fan of Vijay's scholarship, and I've read almost every book the dude has published, so you can't say that I haven't actually engaged with his argument, that was always the part that blew my mind, was he's a believer in the UN and international law. He thinks that these institutions are good and they need to be preserved and they're progressive. It's like, dude, who the fuck divided Korea in half and occupied the South? It's the UN. It was the U.S. using international law as a weapon of war, which even has a name nowadays. It's called lawfare. And Vijay recognizes that lawfare exists, but apparently international law is so just and so above the material conditions, this abstract, just thing, that it can function, for justice. No, of course not. Nothing can be disconnected from the material conditions that produce it. And the material conditions that produced international law were U.S. hegemony and global dominance. The only time that the UN actually was used as a mechanism to prevent war was when the Soviet Union was in the Security Council vetoing the US's attempts to invade. But since the 90s, the US doesn't even bother going through the Security Council anymore. They just bomb whoever they want. And what the hell are you going to do about it, UN?
You know what the energy of like those tweets reminds me of? And I'm going to try to be very respectful here. I'm going to try to be extremely respectful.
Respect.
It's like this fucking guy. No, not him. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Not Kyle.
It's not Kyle. This guy right here, some Ned's Declassified type shit. It's like, actually, the school's law book says you can't run in the hallway, and then the bully fucking throws the guy against the locker room. That's you appealing to international law. Actually, they violated Article 1, 2, 3 of international law, and then the U.S. puts their fucking balls on the table and does whatever the fuck they want, and no one says shit, and you're there, actually, and then they push you into a fucking locker room and close the door. That's what's going on.
That's such a good description. Actually, according to clause number 32 on page, boom, shoot you with a gun. That's it. That's appealing to international law. The thing I like about Finkelstein, too, is he does dig through a lot of international law, but he's critical. He's critical of the UN. He says, their conclusions or whatever are, not based on the actual evidence that they gathered. Because I saw Jason say earlier, like the US or here it is. Thank you for the super chat, brother. 17-page UN report blames the US for all of Venezuela's economic woes. I think is what you're referring to there, the UN rapporteur. Because there are good people who work for the UN and good research that gets done. There's just no enforcement mechanism, right? The institution itself is bourgeois. So even though they publish good research that can be used by an intellectual like Finkelstein, he's still critical of international law itself. He'll use the research that international law scholars, do. And he'll even, talk about how what Israel's doing is illegal by the bourgeoisie's own standard. But he's critical of the fact that nothing gets done. The UN's not going to stop Israel. Only people with guns fighting Israel is realistically.
Can you imagine Finkelstein tweeting? Like, I don't want to say it was VJ in the article, but now that everyone knows, just a few tweets before that historically retarded tweet I cited in the article, he literally outlined like 3 or 4 clauses that were being violated. Like, what? My brother in Christ, what are you doing? Can you imagine Finkelstein just tweeting, Israel is violating these different clauses of international law? It's like, no, bro. That's fucking stupid. No shit. The question when has Israel ever given up land? You know the answer.
Egypt.
What language?
73, when they got their asses whooped and 1,000 IDF soldiers were captured.
What language do imperialists understand? It's that simple. It's not a language we like speaking. It's a language they force us to speak. And if you don't have that realist position, you just look so fucking naive. You look so naive. And VJ should know better. He probably does. And I don't get it. I don't know if maybe it threatens his status as like quote unquote communist world superstar, whatever the fuck, rock star. But I understand the state. I understand China doing it. China does it all the time. I understand them doing it. They have to do it. It's a fucking state. But if you're an individual, if you're not like a leader in a government or another, and you're doing that shit, like what the fuck is wrong with you? That's so stupid.
Just read Marx, Lenin, and Mao. Just stop being a liberal, non-aligned movement. I'm going to tiptoe around Marxism, Leninism. because Lenin was right about imperialism. No, be a real Marxist-Leninist Maoist. Read what they said. Read what they said about how change happens. It's not through fucking international law.
Can you imagine Mao outlining all the violations that Chiang Kai-shek did in China?
Chiang Kai-shek, you are on notice. You have officially been added to my shit list.
It's that, but with a different accent, basically.
It's over for you.
One day, when PC culture is completely dead, we'll be able to do it with an accent. But
right, only
today is
Haas
not
can do
that
that
day.
now.
Only Haas. He's the only one that's brown enough.
Mao had no illusions. None of these Marxist-Leninist leaders did. And you know what? The more involved with organizing we get, the more you realize Lenin was right about freaking everything when it came to organizing, and Mao and these historical leaders, like that iron discipline. You know, maybe early on in your Marxist career, you're like, oh, maybe we can do things more decentralized and not have all this focus on discipline. No, you need the fucking discipline. It is key. It is essential. You need your party to be a hardened group of the most elite and advanced members of the proletariat or the allied classes that can fight in a disciplined and uniform way like an army. That is what you need to bring about change, not appeals on Twitter to the United Nations. So you can do that till the cows come home.
I'd have to disagree with this, comrade. Mao did have quite a few illusions.
That's true, actually.
He didn't have any illusions, but his texts are filled with illusions.
He had a few illusions too.
Well,
70-30.
70-30, but the Red Guards were some dope ass real ones.
Damn right.
No.
Was that Eddie? No, it's our friend Kyle. He's a party cadre who, at one of the ACP events, he made the background of my computer his face, and it's like a year later and I haven't changed it because it cracks me up.
We were doing a stream and I was going off about Trump being a bitch and all these different things, and I thought I was screen sharing, but I was actually sharing Eddie's screen, and it was just Kyle on the screen, and I'm like, you see this fucking guy, he's a piece of shit, he's a bitch, he's this and that. And then Kyle clipped it and he's like, why would Secretary of Education Carlos say this about me? That's funny.
So funny. I like this analogy. Knights of the Round Table. Yes, join the Knights of the Round Table fighting to save our country and countrymen.
Bro, I don't know. That's
dragon.
too gay of an imagery. It's like they're all guys pointing a sword and all the swords are touching. I don't fuck with that imagery.
I like King Arthur. Lancelot was my favorite. He was.
We could be like horsemen, Mongolian horsemen or something, but
there you go. Haas would like that better.
You know, the guys that I like, I can't even. No one likes. I'm the only one that fucks with the samurai because of Tom Cruise and The Last Samurai. I saw it right at the time in my life where I needed some cool, like fucking army style shit. But anyways, your comment is out of order.
Rein it in. You are against PSL's constitutional values.
Actually, yeah, The Last Samurai fucking hits. I don't give a fuck what the.
I love that.
There's so many words I have to censor. I don't give a fuck what the Japanese. The Last Samurai is a great movie.
Samurais were cool too. I'm not gonna lie.
It's like, you know, Japan never apologized for anything, but at least they allowed The Last Samurai to be filmed.
True.
Know?
True. They allowed Tom Cruise in.
The one good white man.
It's the one good one. Was that based on a true story, The Last Samurai?
I hope not. I hope not. No. There was a black samurai. They should have done that. That's the one like Disney film that they have to throw a black guy in there, because there was actually a black guy in Japan that was a samurai. I don't think there was any white guys.
Huh. That'd be a really cool movie, actually.
Yes, but the guy was French. Yeah, you know, at this point, I'm 0 for 2 when it comes to cool black people who I thought were American. and they turn out to be either fucking West German or French or some shit.
Oh, who was the one last time, that musical artist?
Bonnie M. And I just posted it on TikTok. I don't know if we want to watch it real quick. It's a goofy little thing. Yeah, we could watch it. It's funny. But
The Magic of Boney M.
Bonnie M. Oof, Bonnie M. That's top 3 things America produced in the 20th century.
The Magic of Boney M. That's funny. Over 2.
0 for 2. Imagine if I would have said coolest black American ever. This guy was in Japan. And someone's like, well, he's French. It's like, fuck.
Thoughts on Rush Hour? That's another great piece of film.
They got to bring it back. Didn't Trump say he was going to bring it? He was going to do a new. If he does that, I forgive him for whatever else.
A new Rush Hour? With who?
Yeah.
Like him?
He's going to be Jackie Chan or
Jackie Chan and Trump going around New York?
Yeah.
I'd watch that.
Wow.
All right, you got anything else you want to add to the agenda today?
No, this is objectively false. All right. There's so many
especially nowadays.
It's
He's in a
maybe in
bad
the
spot.
90s, but not even in the 90s. I don't think no. Terry Crews is up there. Pro-China Maoist Terry Crews. He was a part of the Cultural Revolution, for those that don't know. He was a Red Guard at the time. Did you know that? All right, it's too late. We have to wrap this up. It's getting way too goofy out here. Paul Robeson is a real serious answer.
Yeah. I was picturing Terry Crews enforcing Maoist discipline.
It'd be like when fucking yeah, buddy.
Ronnie Coleman.
Ronnie Coleman was a cop.
Like,
Wait. Steven Seagal, what a guy. Top 3 Americans in the 20th century. Top 2 martial artists of the 60 years at least.
Russia's greatest martial artist to this day. He's over in Dagestan showing them like crane kicks and.
You know when Putin's like, we haven't even started. This is a very tactical, surgical operation. He's thinking about Steven Seagal in the back of his mind. If he sends that dude into Ukraine, forget about it. It's all over.
His 2 advisors are Dugan and Steven Seagal. Yeah, yes, do this. Very smart guys. Yes, thank you, Steven Seagal.
Bro, Steven Seagal, he was also like a cop for 2 weeks. It was right around the time of the retarded policeman videos, and Steven Seagal had like his own cop show. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, he's like and they gave him like an honorary badge, the police department he filmed the show with.
What an outstanding Renaissance man. Those are the modern back in the day, during Marx's day, it meant you spoke 24 languages. Nowadays it means you wear a ponytail with a weird like vampire looking hairline and you do cool shit, you know.
You do dollar store movies. All right, everybody, let us know in the comments what you want us to talk about next time. Join our Discord, support our Patreon, join Carlos's class. Yeah, am I missing anything?
No, that's pretty much it. Thank you all for watching. This has been fun as always.
Yes, thanks for hanging out, everyone. Solidarity.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no rights. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended and less enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give. And end the vanity of nations. We've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama, in the streets and in the fields. We stand unbowed before their armor, we defy their guns and shields. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The international